This is the story of a writer who was afraid to write. For as long as she could remember, stories surrounded her. She still remembered sitting on her bed at 9 years old, staring at the last word on the page of the first book series she ever finished, The Land of Stories. She was in awe at her accomplishment, and yet a part of her was devastated. She had been on an extraordinary journey with these characters turned friend, and now it was just over? There was only one thing to do: write a speech. A memoir, an ode to the land of stories. So, she stood in her family room and recited her speech, although a part of her wondered how one person could become so attached to a fictional character. Then she had a thought. Could it happen again? Could she find another story that meant just as much to her? Turns out, she could. For the next 2 years, stories shaped her life, but she was never able to put into words why she was so captivated by the written word, until one day. She was sitting in her mother's bed when she came across a video created by a girl named Abby Emmons. Her big eyes and even bigger personality captured the girl's attention, but it was her words that changed everything. Through Abby Emmons' brilliant writing advice, the girl realized that stories weren't just about magical powers and fantastical quests. Stories had the power to inspire others in ways nothing else could. She could relate to the characters on a deep level because they represented her. She was them. They struggled with rejection, trying new things, fear of failure, and every other problem that she and others struggled with. But also, just like them, she had the power to transcend those struggles. When she saw that others were willing to accept their call to adventure and face their fears, even fictional characters, she thought, well, maybe I can too. However, reading stories was easy. Writing her own was not. It didn't take much effort to invest herself into a master storyteller's writing, but to assume that her own writing could ever be that good, it was silly, and much easier to give up on her stories early and never share them with anyone. However, it got complicated when she started acting, and everyone began asking her what her dreams were. Every time she found herself saying the word author, although it squeezed her heart, her fears struck to kill, whispering, "You'll never actually become an author. You're only kidding yourself." I tell them all I have big dreams, but not as big as my doubts seem to be. And I'll say, my dreams weren't real anyway. Those were the words of a song she wrote at 14 years old, sitting on her bed and plucking out the strings. She called the song, "I Get Scared of Everything." However, she finished it on a different note. I need to stop being the side character in my own story. I need to claim that trophy and climb that mountain and clear my way to victory. Although I'm scared, I'll make my way through. January 1st, 2024, I realized that I was playing the side character in my own story, and something needed to change. My dreams seemed too big, but Earl Nightingale said, never give up on a dream just because of the time it will take to accomplish it. The time will pass anyway. My time was passing. So I made an ambitious goal of improving my consistency by writing for 300 out of 365 days. Even if it was just a paragraph, I would write something. That year, and throughout my journey, everything changed. Not only did I achieve my goal, writing an average of 1.12 pages a day, ending in 336 pages and 175,702 words, but I also got accepted into Launchpad, painstakingly learned how to drive, acted and sang for my biggest role on stage yet whilst recovering from a sickness, memorized every single country in the world, attained my first author apprenticeship, moved out of a house I was literally born in, became a dream manager, put on concerts of my own original songs to raise money, spent 2 weeks in an orphanage in Uganda, Africa, and started a podcast with my mother. Each challenge was more terrifying than the last, but I did them anyway. And I found that I was the happiest I had ever been because suddenly I was living a great story. This was when I realized that life-changing adventures don't just exist in fairy tales, but in real life. And even I can make my life story But this is not the end of my story. I want to help others come to this realization as well. I've personally known and seen countless people who are stuck sitting in the audience of their own movie, watching the credits roll, not knowing about the heroic potential that lives inside of them. This leads to boredom, anxiety, depression, and stagnancy. Overall, life sucks, but it never has to be that way. My dream is to write meaningful young adult fiction books that inspire my readers to accept their call to adventure, face their fears, and ascend to a higher plane. But in order to do that, I need to accept my call to adventure and conquer my biggest fear yet. During my last apprenticeship, I shared my goal of consistent writing with my author mentor, Casey West, but she only had one question for me. Have you ever written a book? And of course, my answer was no. She replied, you need to write a book. I knew she was right, although I hated to admit it. My inner voice hollered, how will I ever think that I'm good enough to write a book? My ideas aren't worthy, and I'm not ready. However, another voice whispered, do what it takes to make a story. So I let an irresistible story idea blossom in my mind, and for the next 4 to 5 months, I slowly, non-committally carved it out. However, it wasn't until I started the NGA program that I was forced to set real milestones. By December 1st, 2024, I would have a complete outline, which I had never done before. By February 15th, 2025, I would be done with the first act of my first draft, and by May 23rd, 2025, the end of the school year, I would be done with the first half of my first draft. Suddenly, everything became real. I was writing a book, and I am still writing that book. And my final goal is to complete the first draft by the end of this calendar year. Then, by May of 2027, the end of my official senior year, I want to have published a book. In order to make that happen, I will be focusing on editing and publishing. But this year, my priority is honing my craft and writing my first book. The mere thought of writing something serious and shipping it is terrifying. But I will do it anyway, because that's what it takes to make a great story. However, I cannot achieve this incredible challenge all by myself. 1, I am not yet a master of my craft, and I need to improve my writing skills. 2, I don't know a lot of writers my age, and I know how critical a writing community who could support my love for writing could be. Lastly, 3, I need to meet more young adult authors so that I can interview and build connections, but most importantly, so I can get feedback on my book from masters of my craft. I believe building these connections are how I will break into the writing industry. However, it is hard to get a hold of authors, and I've contacted many in the past who are too busy or simply don't respond. So, in order to satisfy all these vital needs so I can accomplish my goal of writing my first book, I have an ask for the audience and an ask for the board. For those in the audience, I'm asking for the contacts of editors, publishers, and especially authors in my industry so that I can ask for interviews and grow my network. If you are able to help, then you can scan the QR code on the program and access my phone number where you can contact me. To the board, I am asking for you to help me attend a summer writing camp. I've researched many different programs, and the one I decided on is the Young Authors Academy at Brigham Young University, taking into account the price, the varieties offered, and the fulfillment of all 3 of my requirements. 1, improving my writing skills. 2, a young writing community. And 3, networking with authors. It was the best choice. Tuition, food, and housing and transportation all add up to $1,275. I truly believe that this camp will be vital to my author journey. And in return, I have 3 layers of promises. First, at the camp, I promise to network unfailingly. I will personally talk to as many of the teachers and visiting authors as possible, and I will ask for at least 3 SNS interviews. I will also connect with as many peers as I can, building long-lasting connections that will surpass our time at camp. I will also keep a writing journal that will contain detailed notes of all the lessons I learned. Lastly, I will share my first draft with at least 10 people at the camp and ask for feedback. My next layer of promises applies to after I have published my first book. I promise that I will always make time for younger or inexperienced authors and give them access to my network and my wisdom. I personally know how impactful it is to be given help by someone older and wiser, and I want to be that for others. Lastly, I commit to never lose sight of my mission. I sincerely promise that I will share my stories with the world, not just to entertain, but to lift, influence, and inspire. to help everyone see that they are a hero who can decide to live their own great story, just like I have learned and am still learning. Despite having this knowledge, I still fall short, and sometimes I let my fears overtake me. I've recently learned that living a great story isn't just a once-in-a-lifetime revelation. It's an everyday decision. Every day, I have to choose to accept the call. I have to choose to overcome my fears and chase the life I was meant to live. So, in closing, I ask you, what adventure are you refusing right now? Every moment is an adventure, and you are writing your own story, so make it